I'm with Luke Akehurst, the director of We Believe in Israel. Now, Luke, what is We Believe in Israel?
So We Believe in Israel is a pro-Israel campaign network. We are part of BICOM, the Britain Israel Communications and Research Centre, which is the main Israel-focused think tank in the UK. And in 2011, BICOM decided it needed to be doing more to support grassroots pro-Israel campaigners in the UK. So my bit of the organisation was set up, We Believe in Israel. And it's a very broad coalition. It's for anyone that feels that they are a supporter of Israel. Doesn't matter what your political opinions are on any other issue or any other party in the UK or in Israel. Doesn't matter where you're coming from a faith angle. We actually have quite an even balance, really, between Christian supporters and Jewish supporters, and then the third and smaller group is people like myself. I come from a secular, non-faith-based political background, and we get everyone working together, doing all kinds of campaigning, from setting up local pro-Israel groups that run street stalls through to big national online campaigns where we're writing thousands of emails to MPs to try and persuade them to take a more positive stance.
And when were you started as an organisation, and why were you started?
So we were started in 2011, and the external factor is that in 2009 there had been Operation Cast Lead, which is the big and very controversial Israeli incursion and airstrikes into Gaza. And that made the pro-Israel community in the UK realise that there were some shortcomings that we had in terms of our ability to mobilise people at the grassroots, our ability to respond to anti-Israel boycotts in civil society, so in trade unions or the churches or the political parties or on campus. And we didn't have a network for getting calls to action out quickly. Particularly, we didn't have any system for getting people to let their local politicians know that there are a lot of people in the country that do care about Israel. There was a kind of internal factor as well within the Jewish community, which we'd seen in America, that the left and right wings of the Jewish community there were making more of their differences than their shared beliefs. And we wanted an umbrella conference where everyone that considered themselves a Zionist, everyone that considered themselves a supporter of Israel, even if they disagree on particular Israeli policies, that everyone could kind of come together and express support for Israel as a Jewish and democratic state.
Is the BDS movement very big here in the UK?
So the BDS movement, people sometimes talk about the UK as one of its hubs because of the UK's role in non-governmental organisations. A lot of big global charities and NGOs that are very critical of Israel are headquartered in the UK. And because English language media like the BBC and the Guardian and the Daily Mail isn't just, it might be media that is primarily British, but increasingly it's consumed at a global level because so many people are either from English speaking countries or at the least they have English as a second language. And whenever there's any kind of mapping done of anti-Israel activity around the world, the large anti-Israel organisations in the UK, particularly the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, play a disproportionately large role. I would say the boycott movement has made some progress in some churches, so it made some headway, say, in the Quakers and the Methodists, made quite a lot of progress in the trade unions, made progress in some, but not all, student unions. And then recently, obviously, we've had the huge phenomenon that we're trying to tackle the response to of Jeremy Corbyn becoming leader of the British Labour Party. And he's clearly someone that has a long history of involvement in anti-Israel campaigning. But the flip side that I would say of that is BDS has not got a lot of public support. So all the opinion polling shows that it's about 10% of the public that, or maybe 12% tops, that believe in boycotts. of Israel, and far less than that actually do anything about it, that actually go play a proactive role in boycotting anything to do with Israel. So economically, it doesn't really have much impact. People still buy Israeli stuff, and Israel's trade with the UK is actually really thriving and growing at a tremendous rate. But it adds to the idea of the political delegitimization of Israel, trying to make out that Israel is like not a normal country and you shouldn't have normal relationships with it. And it's very hurtful particularly to the Jewish community here, who feel deep personal and family connections and religious connections to Israel. The idea that someone would boycott the only Jewish state in the world is so hurtful and distressing to Jewish people that even if it doesn't have an economic impact, there's still a good reason to try and campaign against it.
And of course they use certain words as well, like apartheid. Is that to send the wrong message too? And is this a sort of form of anti-Semitism?
So again, those words, so let's say that three of the ones that we study when we do opinion polling are allegations to do with Israel being apartheid, to do with it being racist, to do with it being colonial. They don't have that high a cut through with the British public. It's maybe, I think the most recent polling I've seen said maybe a fifth of the public associate those words with Israel. We think it's a totally false allegation, the apartheid one. It's really a shameful thing to try and tar Israel, which is the world's only Jewish state and has a 25% Arab minority who have full political and civil rights. There are Arab diplomats, there are Arab police, there are Arab members of the Knesset, there have been government ministers. There was even a Supreme Court justice who sat on the case of the prosecution of a former Israeli prime minister. This looks nothing like South Africa, and the reality of day-to-day life in Israel looks nothing like apartheid. When you sit in a nice restaurant in Tel Aviv and you look at the next table and it's an Arab family and the one next to it is a Jewish family, this is not apartheid or separation of races or religions. Is it anti-Semitic to make the apartheid allegation? It often can be. So the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism says it is anti-Semitic to deny the Jewish people the right to self-determination to their own country by saying that the state of Israel is a racist endeavour. So if the people that are making the apartheid and racist and colonial allegation are making that about the very foundation of Israel, they're saying that the idea of Jewish people having their own state is inherently all those things. That's anti-Semitic. If they're just attacking the current policies of the current Israeli government, I think that is the apartheid allegation is a false one. It's a really politically unhelpful one. It drives the two sides apart in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict rather than helping to build bridges, but it doesn't pass the IRA definition threshold of anti-Semitism. I'm sorry, that's a bit of a technical argument, but when I think we have to be really careful in the same way they're not being careful when they bandy around allegations like apartheid. If we are going to call out anti-Semitism, we have to be really specific about where it starts and where it finishes. And I'm happy to stick with the IRA definition, as that's the one that lots of governments globally have decided is a working definition of anti-Semitism.
Of course, we can all criticise Israel for certain policies. Not everybody's going to agree, are they?
Yeah, that's right. It's like, lots of people who are not so informed about the situation look at the security barrier and they go, it's an apartheid wall. It's, this dreadful wall. And I think we can all agree it looks ugly, but they will try kind of make out that it's about Israel grabbing land and separate. There are very real cases of Palestinian farmers that can't get to their olive groves anymore, but they don't look at the other side of the question, which was, why was this thing built in the first place? Why on earth Israel doesn't want to live behind a big concrete wall, or even in 90% plus of it is not a wall, it's a fence. It was built because of the Second Intifada, where there were the most horrific suicide bombings, which, yeah, if you've lived there for 18 years, you've probably lived through some of it, where, people walking into pizzerias, into Passover Seders, onto buses, and blowing up totally innocent civilians. Incidentally, blowing up Arab citizens as well as Jewish Israelis, and they could do that because you used to be able to just walk from the West Bank into major Israeli cities, and the security barrier means you get checked as you go through. So you can't go through wearing a suicide bomb, and it's immediately that it was built, the rate of attacks and the rate of deaths plummeted. So I think that's always a good example of something that superficially looks like something unpleasant that the Israeli government has done, and then when you drill into the reasons behind it and the actual impact of it, it was something that was done as a counter-terrorism method and has saved countless lives.
Is there a lot of negativity when it comes to Israel here in the UK?
So if you listen to the noise, and particularly the noise whenever there's a conflict in the region like Gaza in 2014, you can come away with the impression that Britain is an overwhelmingly anti-Israel society. The letters pages of newspapers can be very anti-Israel. Phone-ins to radio shows can be. There will be big marches in the streets. There'll be mass mobilisations of people to make anti-Israel protests, and that can be very scary. But when we do our annual opinion polling, which, it's not us doing it, we commission Populus, who are one of the main UK polling companies, so it's a very scientific, authoritative thing. Actually, we find out every year, and it's been stable for about a decade, that the number of people who feel warm towards Israel and the number of people who feel warm towards the Palestinians is about balanced at about 20% each. So the real picture is not as difficult for Israel as the noise can suggest. And part of the reason for my organisation is to identify who the 20% of people are that are broadly supportive of Israel. Clearly they're not all Jews, because Jews are only 0.5 or 0.6% of the British population. So there's a bunch of people out there that are coming at this from a Christian faith angle, or they're people like me that are secular but just understand the Jewish desire for self-determination and are politically supportive of that. And we're trying to give all those people that are instinctively pro-Israel a voice in the debate in this country and in the political process in this country, so they can take the affection for Israel that they have in their hearts, particularly if they're people of faith, and that they can express that within the political system.
Now, you have many different campaigns. What sort of campaigns are you running?
So just recently we did a petition about the decision by the Malaysian government to ban Israeli Paralympian swimmers from coming into the country for a Paralympic qualifying event, which got thousands of signatures, and we know that it contributed to the decision by the International Olympic Committee, by the IPC, the International Paralympic Committee, to pull the games out of Malaysia, because they actually interacted with us on Twitter. We tagged them in when we were promoting the campaign, and they replied and said, this is really serious and we're looking at it. And then a fortnight later, they acted. Another example is that Good Morning Britain, which is one of the big morning TV shows over here, which is normally very uncontroversial. It's like a kind of people sat on a sofa chatting, but they decided to run a poll on Twitter about Eurovision, and Eurovision being in Tel Aviv, and was it okay to boycott it? And we asked people on our email list to participate in that poll. And they took the poll down because people also complained that it wasn't something they should really be running an opinion poll on. But at the point at which the vote was pulled down, we were winning 60-40. 34,000 people said that they didn't believe in boycotting Israel. The next big campaign that we're going to be running, we work very closely with an organisation called Israel-Britain Alliance. One of our other big partners in that is Christians United for Israel. And we're going to be running a campaign about Israel Apartheid Week, which is something that happens on UK campuses trying to portray Israel as apartheid. We're going to be asking people to write to their members of parliament about the way in which that can create a very alienating atmosphere for Jewish students on campus.
Now, you also have a website called Israel Hate Watch. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so Israel Hate Watch is our second website, and the idea there is to catalogue and shine a spotlight on hatred of Israel that manifests itself in the UK, at a street level or on campus or wherever we encounter it. It could be things that people say that get filmed if they're out in the street, could be the offensive placards that people bring on a demo, could be motions that get passed in different organisations. And some of this stuff is also anti-Semitic, but we don't limit it to stuff that breaches the IRA definition and is anti-Semitic. We're also interested in stuff that is just expressing irrational hatred of Israel. So it's a website that one day I'd like to shut it down because there's no longer any of that in the debate. It's tragic that we have to have it. But while this kind of horrible discourse exists, which incidentally I think is very, very unhelpful to the Palestinians, doesn't help anyone understand the plight of the Palestinians or their needs in the world or their aspirations to a state, to have that expressed as like hatred of Israelis. But while that anti-Israel hatred is out there, we're using that website as a place to keep a record of it and help the public to understand how this kind of discourse is not acceptable or helpful in the debate.
Is this organised hatred?
It's a mixture. So some of it is individuals. I think tragically, while social media is kind of great for helping people to hold politicians to account and to express their views, it has also enabled really nasty anti-Semitic tropes connected to Israel that were previously lurking in the undergrowth of political debate. It's enabled those tropes to propagate very fast, and individuals pick them up on social media and run with them without fully understanding them. For instance, last night I was reading views expressed by a member of the Labour Party who was unhappy about the Labour MPs that have defected over anti-Semitism. And this guy's response that he put on Facebook was to start going on about this was manipulation of politics by Jewish bankers who didn't want a socialist government. And he literally started talking about the Rothschilds. He also threw in the Rockefellers, which is a bit odd because they're a Christian American family and nothing to do with... but he kind of thought that they were all Jewish names. So that's like individuals just picking up old lies and being influenced by them. Groups that go out and campaign and do it in a hateful way, they tend not to be so blatantly anti-Semitic, but they can still make very offensive allegations about Israel that have echoes of anti-Semitism. So for kind of implying that Israel in any conflict to do with Gaza is somehow relishing the deaths of civilians has an echo of the blood libel which existed in medieval Christian anti-Semitism. And it's whether that's a conscious echo or not, it's certainly something that they ought to be more careful about. But when it's an organised group where someone's actually sat down and thought about what do we publish, it tends to be a little bit more cautious and a bit less obvious in the way it's expressed. And then you get stuff where the mainstream of a demonstration might be anti-Zionist and they don't want Israel to exist as a state. You could put up a good case that that's actually anti-Semitic. Why would you deny Jewish people their right to a state if you're not denying it to anyone else? And the official placards will just kind of be anti-Zionist, but people will turn up with ones that they've made at home that are more explicitly anti-Semitic, like the substitution of swastikas for Magen Davids, or the portrayal of Netanyahu as though he's a Nazi, or out-and-out allegation, it's kind of Israelis are baby killers type stuff, which is a blood libel, or Rothschild's conspiracies, and people can't resist bringing that kind of placard along. I mean, I really, it's very disturbing and alarming that you sat at home and you're going to go on a protest that's about a conflict involving the world's only Jewish state, and you don't stop and pause and think, it's really important that I don't bring an anti-Semitic message to this. I mean, if I was angry enough about Israel being in a conflict situation with the Palestinians, I would hope that the placard I would bring would say peace now or ceasefire now. I hope it wouldn't pile into the Israelis making comparisons or insinuations or tropes that echo traditional anti-Semitism. And you just have to kind of ask yourself why the pro-Palestinian movement, but they're just an anti-Israel movement, why they don't police themselves more. They know the sensitivities in this debate. They know that it actually harms their own cause to associate it with anti-Semitic tropes. They don't seem to make all the efforts that they could do to ensure that their demonstrations or their events are free of this kind of stuff.
Now, you're not Jewish, but you're a Zionist.
Yeah.
Why do you love Israel?
So it's partly family background, that my grandfather served in the army in World War II with at least one, I think maybe more than one Jewish comrade in the army who he stayed friends with after the war, and I met these people when I was a kid, when they were elderly. And I think he also had Jewish colleagues or taught in a Jewish school at some stage during his teaching career. So the background I heard from my mum and my grandfather was to be sympathetic to the Jewish community, to understand what they'd gone through in the Holocaust, and to understand the need that they had for a Jewish state, and historical events that were kind of near to me being a young kid. But I was born in 1972, so 1967 Six-Day War was kind of there in the background, and the early things I heard about that were to understand that Israel had been defending itself against neighbouring powers that were basically trying to repeat the Holocaust in what they were doing. And then I arrived with that family background at university and made friends with a lot of people from the Jewish society, because we had common calls. I mean, I was kind of interested in their culture and where they were coming from. I was intrigued by it. I hadn't met Jewish people my age before, and made common calls with them in opposing extremism on campus, people like the Socialist Workers' Party. So I was very involved in the student wing of the Labour Party, and we considered it part of our political responsibility to show solidarity with Jewish students on campus when they were facing anti-Semitism or facing anti-Israel boycotts, etc. And all of the connections I've had with Jewish people here in the UK have kind of reinforced that sense of wanting to show solidarity. The more you learn about the Jewish community, the more admirable it is, and the more you understand the historic suffering of the Jewish people. And then I didn't actually get to visit Israel until Labour Friends of Israel took me there in 2005. So this is a long time after I was already involved in the issue. But then in my current job, I've been back, at least a dozen, maybe 15 times. And every time it is so inspiring. The history of the place is amazing. The landscape and the beauty of the country is amazing. The resilience and vibrancy and energy of the people is so amazing. The sense of a country with a very deep, long history, going back to biblical times, but also because of the 2,000 years of exile, of a very new country that's only just celebrated its 70th birthday, and of people pioneering, really, and trying to do something that in world historical terms is huge, to restore a people that were in exile for 2,000 years and oppressed and suffering from racism and totally downtrodden and had no self-governance at all, to restore them to the dignity and the security and the safety of a nation state. That is an amazing, inspiring story, and every time I go there, I come back feeling so uplifted. You'll see the parallel there with the Jewish phrase Aliyah. I'm not qualified. I don't qualify to make Aliyah, but I get how if I'm feeling 10% of the feeling that a Jewish person gets when they in Israel, then yeah, I get it. If there's anyone listening that hasn't visited, you must go. It's an amazing country.
What's your website, finally, for people who'd like to know more about the work that you do?
Yeah, so it's www.webelieveinisrael.org.uk. Please do go there. There are campaigns you can participate in, and you can sign up for our emails, and that's the best way to keep in touch with us.
Okay, Luke, thank you very much.
Thank you. Great to talk to you.